Despite the fact that I'm a huge fan of the Yakuza / Like a Dragon series, I haven't played all of the games in the series. And for those not in the know wondering why is that, it's because while SEGA was happy to give us stuff like Yakuza Dead Souls back in the PS3 era when zombie games were popping, it's unfortunate that we missed out on a lot of the more positively reviewed spin-offs of the series, like Ryuga Gotoku Kenzan and Ishin respectively from the PS3 and PS4 days. These games were set in more historical periods of Japan and featured a lot of our favorite faces from the series as stand-ins for historical figures during the times. And for the longest time, if you weren't living in Japan, you were missing out on these games, which had fans in the West crying foul for the longest time if you weren't, versed in the emulation scene. Clearly the fans were ready to throw their money at SEGA, so the question was, how come we never got a localized release of the games? Well, almost a decade after the games came out, we finally got something when RGG Studios decided to hold the RGG Summit, which is their version of the thing all these companies do these days instead of going to E3, where they tell you all the stuff they're working on for the next couple of years. Like a Dragon 8 was clearly the most anticipated announcement because it was leaking before the summit happened, but on top of that, we got word about Like a Dragon Gaiden, which is another Kiryu-focused game set between Yakuza 6 and Yakuza Like a Dragon. But the biggest surprise for fans was that Like a Dragon Ishin was being announced as a remake in the same vein as Yakuza Kiwami and Yakuza Kiwami 2. So not only were we finally getting this long-requested spin-off in the West, we were finally getting it brought up to the standards of the more modern releases of the series. Some interesting choices were being made for this game too, such as the game being remade in the Unreal Engine instead of the Dragon Engine because RGG Studios believes that the Dragon Engine is starting to show its age, while many characters in Ishin are being recast with familiar faces from the more modern releases. Clearly, these were moves that got everybody talking, but we didn't have to wait long to see if the changes were worth it, what with the game launching in mid-February 2023. This was one of my most anticipated releases for early 2023, and in the week leading up to the game coming out, SEGA decided to grace your boy with a review copy of the game, and I'm very excited to talk about this game. So, without further ado, here is my review for Like a Dragon Ishin on PlayStation 5.
Hey, yo, Giant, let's go!
In Like a Dragon Ishin, we follow the story of Sakamoto Ryoma, a lower-born samurai known as a Goshi during the last days of the Bakumatsu period of Japan. He returns to his homeland of Tosa after being sent to Edo to receive sword training at the behest of his father figure Yoshida Toyo. Tosa suffers from inequality allowed by a class system that separates samurai by 3 classes. In order from highest to lowest, it goes Goshi being the peasants of society, with high Goshi serving as middle class, and Joshis being the elites. And they waste no time showing the lack of character in these elites when a group of Joshi abused a woman in the street for not bowing to them when she was fearing for the life of her daughter who's currently suffering from appendicitis. Sakamoto stands up to them and quickly gets thrown in jail for defending her when Toyo pops in and uses his political standing to get him released from jail. He then instructs him to reunite with Takechi Hanpeta, Ryoma's sworn brother since childhood, who also at the instruction of Toyo forms the Tosa Loyalist Party. Their separate paths being designed to converge at this point by Toyo, having them trained up to dismantle the unjust system and bring equality to the people. And Ryoma is given the role of party representative, much to the chagrin of the members of the party, some even trying to attack him in private, but Sakamoto proves that he's about this life. And after the reunions are through, Takechi and Sakamoto meet with Yoshida to plan how they're gonna outline their attack when the meeting is ambushed and Yoshida gets assassinated. Takechi chases after the assassin and Ryoma rushes to his pops' side. With his dying breath, Yoshida tells Sakamoto that the fate of the country rests in his hands, and just then, a bunch of people rush in to see Sakamoto holding the body of Yoshida, thus assuming that he was the culprit. Sakamoto escapes to see the ninja leaving a trail of bodies in his wake and leaving Takechi injured. Sakamoto tries to take the assassin on, but the killer gets a good blow in, knocking Sakamoto on his butt and taking off. Sakamoto tries to escape the scene with the injured Takechi, and as he tries to process what's going on, Takechi is hanging on by a thread. When guards start to close in on them, Takechi tells Sakamoto to leave him behind, but Sakamoto instead hides Takechi in a nearby shack and draws the attention of the guards, swearing that he did not kill Yoshida, but that he will get revenge on the one who did. And the guards are taken by surprise as Sakamoto jumps off a cliff, presumably to his death, and saving Takachi in the process by covering his tracks. Fast forward 1 year later, we find Sakamoto living in Kyo, going by the name of Saito Hajime, having committed dappan, which is the historical loose equivalent of defecting from your country and is a capital offense. He's been living his days putting on a carefree personality, challenging local dojos and doing backdoor deals with information brokers. He challenges these dojos searching for leads on Pops' assassin, having apparently learned that the masked man used a very uncommon style known as the Tenin Rishin style. After a couple of choice encounters, namely one with an info broker named Matsusuke Nibori, he finds himself meeting with the Bathkeeper of Sai, the information broker in Kyo, who gives him a solid lead to go on. The Shinsengumi, which is a group dedicated to hunting down those that oppose the current rule and service of the Bakufu, is led by the fourth heir to the style, Kondo Isami, and he, along with his disciples, are among the highest ranking officers of this organization. Among these names are Hijikata Toshizo, Yamanami Keisuke, Nagakura Shinpachi, Okita Soji, Heisuke Todo, and Inoue Genzaburo. Having a better shot than ever at finding his target, he barely even gets to dry off before he gets into a fight with another important character named Kichinosuke Saigo, and around the same time he gets approached by Okada Izo, one of Takachi's goons who lets Sakamoto know that his brother's in town. They meet for the first time in a year, only for Sakamoto to find out that Takachi has taken a higher post back in Tosa. While Takachi explains that this is a means to an end to change the government from within, Sakamoto is incensed to learn that his brother is cozying up to the people who most likely orchestrated Pops' death, so he announces to Takachi that he plans to join the Shinsengumi. Not a single care for Takachi's political machinations, his only concern is finding the man who took Pops' life. The Shinsengumi higher-ups his clear target, Sakamoto has his goal in sight. But there are still many questions. Not just who was Pops' killer, but who ordered the hit and why? How close can Sakamoto come to his answer without giving away his identity? Will he have what it takes to avenge his father? And what did Yoshida mean when he said that the fate of the country is in Sakamoto's hands? There's a lot to uncover, and I'll leave it to you to find out just how many threads spin this web of intrigue. After all, I've just only explained the first 2 chapters out of 14. It took me just shy of 30 hours to complete this game, so you'll be surprised by just how many curveballs it throws you in response to how straightforward it all seems at first. But if you're up to the task, then you'll have a number of ways to see Sakamoto's mission through. Seeing as how Yakuza 0 and Kiwami are considered the higher tier of RGG combat, you'll be happy to know that Ishin is under the same umbrella as those games. You get the tried and true style switching gameplay, but the game is more hack and slash than beat 'em up this time around. And the 4 available styles, only one is barehanded. The others are weapon based: swordsman, gunman, and wild dancer, aka why not both, which is the game's version of rush style with Sakamoto using the gun and the sword at the same time. You might not get the same feeling out of all of these styles. I personally used gunman the least, but the options are always nice. As you play through, you'll eventually gain access to a blacksmith that grants you access to some Monster Hunter-esque upgrade trees for your weapons. Some weapons can be enhanced further with orbs that grant passive bonuses, and some offer more skills. That plus your regular upgrade tree gives you an ever-increasing list of options in combat. And as always, there's really specific wacky heat attacks, such as one that can only be performed when you have an orange in your inventory. I personally like this game's level up system, where you gain level orbs based on how much you use a certain style to unlock upgrades in that specific style, and you can use more general spirit orbs earned by regularly leveling up. But if you do, you can always replace them with style orbs as a sort of indirect respec. Add in a master of each specific style, like an ancestral Komaki-san among others, and there'll be plenty of training available to you for handling a bunch of the fights throughout the story. You'll also run into more armored enemies later on, and you craft different kinds of ammo for even more options, which I didn't personally feel the need to, but options are options. Aside from the combat or your usual sub-stories, you run into this game's version of Haruka, who apparently owes money on a home she inherited from her parents, so Sakamoto promises to help her out, and this opens up the second home portion of the game, where you farm vegetables and cook food that you can either use to fill orders for profit or use in place of healing items so that you don't have to spend money at the shops. Eat your fucking heart out cooking, mama! Yes. It's a nice side activity that I got a bit wrapped up in halfway through, because it was also a good means of accruing virtue, which is another form of currency you earn just for doing things in the game. You can spend these on numerous upgrades that not only buff your farming abilities, but things like your sprint, and even make it so you earn more virtue faster. Whatever your course of action, you naturally have an absurd amount of things to do in this game, much like any other RGG game. Also, yes, you can sing Baka Mitai in this game. Hey, I'm a simple man. You let me dame dane and I'm dame da sold. And Sakamoto goes off on that flute solo. They also replaced the usual arcade fare with shogi and mahjong parlors, which I don't know shit about how to play those games, but whatever, this game is fun as fuck anyway. As I mentioned in the beginning, RGG Studios made the decision to swap over to Unreal Engine 4 for this remake, and it looks really nice, but as far as them wanting to switch to Unreal 5 moving forward because the Dragon engine is aging, nope. Yeah, I don't buy that. But Unreal 4 is actually doing some heavy lifting here. This is an impressive facelift, basically giving a facelift to the graphics similar to Zero and Kiwami, but the game has some stunning backgrounds. And never mind the lighting changes that doesn't give this game the weird pea yellow tint anymore. As for the model switches, I never had an opportunity to play the original as I said at the beginning of this video, so I don't have the same level of attachment to the original actors. That said, it's not that I love these characters, it's that I think if you're familiar with any of these characters from the main games, then you can sort of draw parallels to who they're standing in for in this game personality wise. That's 100% intentional because given how old the game is to the uninitiated, this helps ease you into paying more attention to these characters. When you move out of the cinematics, which are gorgeous by the way, as usual, the in-game graphics are still pretty solid, even if some of the Yakuza 0 level NPC models stick out like a sore thumb against the scenery. But you get some variety in the city districts, Sakamoto's hotel by the river and the shopping district, to the main streets, to the Shinsengumi barracks on the outskirts of town. There's a lot of eye candy here. Musically, the game is very familiar too. While there's more than a few samurai-styled remixes of iconic tracks like Receive You throughout the game, there's plenty of mainstay tracks from Zero in here too, especially some of the wackier tracks that you'd be hearing during sub-stories. A healthy balance of old and older in this soundtrack, and I love it. The voice acting is still strong as per usual, and that includes the played-up random foreigner speaking Japanese badly and the occasional goofily delivered English words in contrast to the more serious scenes. While there's not the series staple manly men tearing off their breakaway suits to show off their back tats, there's plenty of sword stances and blood to make up for it. No other RGG game has played this fast and loose with the violence on display. Kiryu may have never killed anyone, but Sakamoto? Yeah, he was never beating those allegations even if he cared about them in the first place. Also, there's an entire boss fight that takes place in a bathhouse with everyone's junk covered by steam. It may not be necessarily doing too much new, but that's kind of the point with this one. If you're still pining for the days where Yakuza 0 was peak and you're still looking for some tried and true beat 'em up gameplay, Like a Dragon Ishin's got you covered. It's another solid entry in the long line of RGG Studio beat 'em ups with plenty more hijinks to fill the void. And until Like a Dragon Gaiden and 8 drop, look forward to all the YouTube memes for all your typical goofiness. And once again, thank you to SEGA for the review code. This game was a super fun time. But let me know your thoughts on it. Feel free to leave a comment, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. But in the meantime, I gotta whip up some more pickles for Haruka's orders.
Yosh.